Hello friends and welcome to the Southern Mountain Kitchen. Today we're going to make homemade beef stew. So we're going to start out with 2 pounds of beef. Now you could get the stuff that's already cut up as stew meat from the store, or you can actually buy a piece of beef to cut up for this. Basically we just need it to end up in cubes. There's no rhyme or reason about how you have to cut this up or how big these pieces have to be. It's just they need to be cut into cubes to go into our recipe here. And as far as the beef is concerned, you know what? I usually just go for whatever I can get a deal on at the store because God knows it's expensive. But we actually can find some deals sometimes, especially when they run a sale, and that's usually what I get to use to make for beef stew, because you're basically just going for the idea of you're adding a good beef to this that just has a good taste to it. So we're going to cut this up into cubes, get it all cut up before we start doing the next process of this, and just work our way through all of it. And it's going to take a minute to cut it up if you are cutting it from scratch. But once we get to that point, we're going to move on to our next step and start doing the next part of this. So in a large skillet, we're going to add in about maybe 3 to 4 tablespoons of olive oil, and then we're going to put in the beef, and we're going to move it around because we want to get this cooking before we start doing anything like adding seasoning. But when we do get to adding the seasoning to it, we are going to add 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of steak seasoning, and then after that we're adding 1.5 teaspoons of garlic and pepper seasoning to this. And we want to get this in here and kind of get it moved around a little bit so that way all of these pieces of beef are coated with the seasoning and it's starting to cook into it, because we want all of this to get the best flavor from the seasoning that we can get. So just move it around, make sure everything's really coated with the oil and the seasoning in the pan, and just move it around until it's all ready to go. And then we're going to add to this 1 large onion, which we've cut up. Basically just cut it into hunks. It's going to cook down as it cooks. Get that in there. And make sure that your onion is pretty much broken up as you're starting to cook this. And then we're going to add a 1/2 cup of red and green bell pepper pieces that have been cut up as well. And then once it's in, move it around, get the oil on these. So we want to make sure that the vegetables really start cooking at this point. So just move them through the beef that's in here. Just get it however you have to mix it through and break up all those pieces of onion and everything to make sure that everything is totally circulated through and that the beef is getting the best flavor from the peppers and the onions at this point. So just cook this on medium-high heat for a while until we start to get it cooked. And it's going to take probably about 10 minutes or so to get this completely cooked through, but that's okay because we're just going to take our time and work our way through the recipe as it's cooking. But you need to continuously turn this and make sure that it's cooking on all sides. And at the same time, we're going to add 1/4 cup of flour to this, which this is going to add a little bit of a coating to the beef. But when you go to put this into the stew itself, it's going to thicken it up, make it a little more hearty, a little bit thicker. And that's actually a really good thing. So we want to cook this into the beef as it's cooking with the vegetables. So we're just going to go ahead and move this around, make sure everything gets really coated, and just go from there. Now, as you're moving this, you want to make sure that you don't let it sit too long on one side, because we want to make sure that all of this is getting cooked, especially for the onions and the peppers, because we don't want them coming out hard in the end. We want them to soften up. We just want to make sure that we get them really cooked along with the beef. And as you're turning this, you're going to pay attention to the beef to make sure that if you see that pinkish red side, that gets turned down so that way it cooks from the underside of the pan. So go ahead and flip it around, make sure everything is moved through, and continue to cook this on medium-high heat. So that way we can make sure that everything gets a really good cooking on this before it goes into the actual beef stew, because we don't want to put anything in there that's undercooked. We want to make sure that it does really well as is. So we're just going to let this sit and cook for a few. As I said, this could take 10 minutes or so to cook. During that time, I would come through and turn it every maybe a minute or so, just to make sure that it's cooking on all the sides and everything is turning out really well. So go ahead and move this back and forth as much as you have to. And you're going to notice at this point that for the vegetables, they're starting to soften up and they're going to be really great, because we really don't want any hard pieces, anything. There's nothing worse than fixing like a beef stew and biting into a hard piece of vegetable that you put in there that didn't cook thoroughly. So we just want to make sure that we get that completely cooked before we move on to the next step, and make sure that that meat is done. So in a large pot, you're going to need at least 4 cups of water, and to this we're adding 3/4 of a cup of carrots, and then 3 large baking potatoes cut up into cubes. And we're going to get this like up to temperature, so go ahead and make this sure this is like at high heat at this point. And we're going to cook this for about 20 minutes until we make sure that these are cooked through. Now, if you ever want to test this to make sure if your potatoes are done or not, you can take a fork and stick it into your potato, and if it goes through easily, it's cooked. If it doesn't go in and you have some resistance, you need a few more minutes. But just go ahead, bring this to a boil, cook these, and then we're going to go ahead to the next step of adding things into this. So make sure that your temperature is coming up, and as they cook, we're just going to like make sure that we move these around a little bit every now and then just to check on them to see that they're doing well. And as you can see at this point, mine is done, so I'm going to start adding some more to this. So I am using some Better Than bouillon, which I'm using about 2 tablespoons worth of this, putting into it, and just move it around. It'll start to dissolve as you start moving through the hot water. And then we're going to add in some other things to this, which are basically right now we're building our stew at this point because the beef and everything is already cooked. To this we're adding 32 ounces of Italian diced tomatoes. They're seasoned with Italian seasoning. We're going to mix that through a little bit. And then afterwards we are bringing in 1 8-ounce can of tomato paste, and we're putting that in. Make sure this breaks up because this stuff seems to like to sit around a lot, so the more you move it in the hot liquid, the better it's going to dissolve. And then after we get that all mixed up, we're going to bring in a can of green beans which have been drained. So I go ahead and drain all the liquid out of it, put it in a bowl, and then just pour it in here because of the fact that we don't want any of that liquid coming from the can into this. And then afterwards we have 1 small can of tomato sauce, which basically it's those itty bitty cans you see on the shelf. Just go ahead and pour that all in there, and we're going to mix this up because basically this is a lot of flavor right now going into this beef stew, and everything here is just wonderful. Then after this we're going to bring back in a minute the beef and the peppers and the onions and everything that we already cooked, because we want to make sure that everything is in here and ready to roll. So let this come up to temperature. We want to actually get this up to a boil. That way when we get everything else into it, we're gonna like set it to the side for a second here, just like let it come down on medium heat and just let it cook for 45 minutes on this burner. That's gonna be it. So once you got your beef in there and you got your vegetables back into it, go ahead and stir it up so that way that the peppers, the onion, the beef, everything works its way through. And as I said, once this comes up to a boil, we're gonna turn it down to medium high heat, maybe put a lid on it, and let it cook for 45 minutes. And when it's done, this is such an amazing thing to eat. The best thing is, it's really not hard to make beef stew and make good beef stew, but just got to put a little effort into it. And this is really everything you have to do this other than letting it cook for the 45 minutes. And when it gets to a 45-minute marker, it'll look something like this. Everything is cooked through, everything is wonderful. And this has a great taste because of all of the different things that are in there. They just work together to taste so great. And especially for the fact that like when you put in the diced tomatoes with that Italian seasoning, it gives it a kick. And this is what mine looked like in a bowl. And I gotta tell you, this is something really wonderful to have on a cold day. It's just a hot, wonderful soup, and it's just great. So if you like beef stew, you're gonna like this one. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please like and subscribe. And if you get a chance, check out the Southern Mountain Kitchen website where you can get a free recipe, check out the cookbooks available from the Southern Mountain Kitchen, and if you'd like to, you could order a cookbook at a discounted price, cheaper than Amazon, with shipping that is also cheaper than Amazon. So if you get a chance, check it out, and I hope you have a great day.